The Tunnel is a found-footage mockumentary horror film directed by Carlo Ledesma. The film was actually produced via crowdfunding, through the film's writer-producers pre-selling a digital frame of the film for $1 Australian buck apiece. They were able to successfully raise their target of $135,000, and after 14 days of shooting followed by editing by the same writer-producers, it was released on May 18th, 2011. Despite being such a small film, the release was met with fantastic reception, and I'd say damn worth it. Frankly, I'm surprised I'm only getting around to reviewing it now, given how much I absolutely loved it. The approach to the film as a mockumentary is actually very well done. Almost on par with Lake Mungo, which isn't to say that you might fall for it being real, but it's essentially the way a real documentary would produce the story were it true, disregarding the, horror aspects of a horror film. Structured as footage from the subterranean train tunnels beneath Sydney, Australia, and occasionally cutting back to the interview clips of the survivors after the events. The story is that the government of New South Wales informs the public of their plans to recycle water trapped in these underground train tunnels, but suddenly they change their minds, paired along with a recent string of homeless people who would occupy the tunnels going missing. It goes relatively unnoticed except by the protagonist reporter, Natasha, who believes a mass cover-up has been executed. After an interview with a homeless tunnel survivor goes wrong, the team's next project, deceptively helmed by Natasha, becomes an in-the-field investigation of the tunnels. The performances are almost completely great. There are times where it gets a little cliche. I can only recall one scene where they're yelling at each other in the tunnels, and it just seems a bit too amateur. And it doesn't always seem like the actress for Natasha is entirely in it. Beyond that, I didn't have a problem with the jobs the cast did. There are some points where they utilize music cues to emphasize the action, and it does get a little distracting. But they kinda get away with it under the whole mockumentary thing being edited in post-production along with the interviews. Despite such a low budget, and considering where the budget came from, this film has surprisingly fantastic effects and production. I don't recall a single point where the effects really stood out to me poorly, especially with the monster. The writing is almost entirely great as well. The characters are pretty relatable and realistic for the most part. They seem almost like real people, with the exception of the argument scene I mentioned, which I really just don't think is performed or written well. It just stands out to me in a bad way, but it doesn't bring the film down because of it. Also, they spend too much time presenting Natasha as a cliche horror movie woman who panics and becomes irrational, but it's just damn well done all around. When you think of a real horror gem, especially in found footage, this is easily and absolutely up there with them all. It's one of those films that leaves you craving more, thirsty for elaboration. It might be considered a bit dated by some people's standards, but I think that these things need to be looked past to see the real fruit beneath the rind. It never helps to get caught up in the little sticky details unless they truly make a difference. In fact, a year after the film's released, it was announced that they were planning on making a sequel based on a woman looking for her brother who was lost in the tunnels. However, there hasn't been any news on the sequel's production in 8 years as far as I can tell, though they supposedly had the funding to do so maybe we've got a Half-Life 3 for horror mockumentaries. In closing, The Tunnel is a horror film made with love for the genre, and you can tell from the very beginning to the very end. It's worth a watch and another watch, and is certainly staying in my library.